For decades, literally decades, if not longer, we have talked about working together, suburbs and city. Now we have no choice but to work together. And to me, that's a good thing, because not only am I looking out for people in the suburbs, I'm also looking out for my constituents in the city. And I don't always think that people in the suburbs realize what the issues in the city are. Now that is kind of crossing over 8 Mile. It's not as much of an invisible border that we have, or wall, I should say, because now we are working together. We don't have a choice but to work together. And I think that's a great thing.
Today on the show, my guest is State Representative Mike McFall. His 8th House district spans from Madison Heights through Hazel Park and into Detroit down into Midtown. Our conversation is wide-ranging and talks about bridging divides between the city and suburbs, transit, changes in our region in the last couple of decades, and a whole lot more. Before going to Lansing, Mike served as a councilperson in Hazel Park, with one of his focuses being on improving their downtown district. I am Jer Stays, and this is your Daily Detroit for Monday, December 18th, 2023. Thanks for joining us. Let's hop into that conversation after a word from our friends at City Bird Detroit. Are you looking for the perfect gifts this holiday season that celebrate Detroit and Michigan? I know from personal experience that you can find something special for everyone on your list at City Bird. Unique, thoughtful, and local, City Bird has it all for anyone on your list. Imagine surprising your loved ones with their exclusive line of ceramic ornaments, beautifully designed to celebrate the things that make our area special, or classic engraved neighborhood rocks glasses with your choice of 60 Detroit neighborhoods for a touch of elegance. City Bird also offers a curated selection of jewelry, candles, home goods, and apparel by hundreds of local and independent makers. You can find that perfect gift for that special someone. And let me tell you, I know from personal experience, do not forget the card. And here, the cards are truly special. Visit City Bird today and make this holiday season truly memorable, not just by buying gifts, but enjoying the city while you do it. Located in Detroit at 460 West Canfield, between Cass and 2nd Avenues in Midtown, or online at citybirddetroit.com. That's citybirddetroit.com. Joining me in the Daily Detroit studio at Techtown, somebody who wants to have a word with us, Mike McFall. He is the state representative for the 8th House District. His district stretches all the way from, 14 Mile or so?
Correct.
All the way through Madison Heights, Hazel Park, parts of the city of Detroit, the north end, and all the way down here to Techtown.
Highland Park is also in there.
That's Highland Park as well.
Yes,
Do not want to skip it. There's actually, let's see, are there any other cities I forgot?
Just the precinct of Ferndale.
One precinct?
Correct.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I had learned that you listen to the show.
I do.
And I learned through a way where my colleague Norris Howard made a comment. He referred to one of the areas that you serve as Hazeltucky.
Correct.
And I think it's a great springing point to talk about not just that, but a lot of things going on. And so thank you for coming down to Daily Detroit.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to defend my city.
So specifically, I think Norris meant it in a tongue-in-cheek kind of way.
Right.
He obviously has been to Hazel Park. There's plenty of places I've been to Hazel Park in, and I enjoy it. What about the comment for you was like, hey, I'm going to send an email?
Well, it was a little surprising, just because, we've done a ton of work, I think, in the city to change that image to the outside world. I know some of the people that are longtime residents, they look at it as a positive because that's their heritage, that they appreciate the Hazeltucky thing. But whenever I talk to them about it and I tell them that someone from the outside is using it, it's typically not in a friendly way.
So this was something that if he was family, he could have said it, but he's not family.
That's an excellent point. But like I like to tell people, we're not your father's Hazel Park. We have a lot of new residents in the city. We've had a lot of new development. I think the city has gone in a much different direction.
Let's talk about a few of those things to start. I know right off the bat, if you're going out and having fun, you've got like the Eastern Palace Club. That's something
Correct.
that both Robin and Randy have talked a lot about. Mickey has talked about. People who've been on the show, they're really excited about it. And the restaurant strip that's kind of happening there on John R. has gotten a lot of plaudits. Hazel Park is also one of the communities that is most open to the exchange and sale of marijuana legally.
Very much so. Very much so. We're all in on marijuana.
So what are some of the things from your perspective beyond those obvious things that you can see if you drive in for Hazel Park?
besides those things, like I was the first openly gay city council member. Like when I ran for city council, it was never an issue in the city. I had no problem telling people, talking about it. Nobody seemed to care. And I was easily elected, I want to say, because I ran with another gentleman who had been on council for almost 20 years at that point, and I was only 14 votes under him. So I did a very good job, I think, of telling people, and people just didn't care. That's also when we started doing a pride flag outside City Hall every June, and I don't think a lot of people realize we do that. We also celebrate Juneteenth in Hazel Park. We've partnered with Ferndale for the past couple of years on Juneteenth events, and we also fly the Juneteenth flag. And I don't think a lot of people outside the city of Hazel Park realize that we have all of these things going on there. I will tell you, though, because you mentioned marijuana, that has been one of the big drivers of change in the city, because we're getting a lot of people that come into the city that wouldn't have probably come there otherwise. Same with the restaurants like Mabel Gray and Frame, or Matt and Moe's, too, because people come in. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Matt and Moe's.
Oh, I've been.
Oh, it's amazing. They're so good. Those sandwiches, they're very messy, but they're very good.
I twitch a little at that Chicago flag, but I understand they're from there, so I'll take it. I'll take it.
Yes. Well, and the other part I really like is that Matt and Maureen are also residents of Hazel Park, which is not uncommon with a lot of our business owners. James Regato, that owns Mabel Gray, he's a resident of Hazel Park. He lives there. So that's actually a very common thing. The owners of BDT, which is a longtime staple head shop, and they've expanded into being a lot more, they live in Hazel Park.
You'll laugh, but the reason I end up going to Hazel Park the most is that on Sundays, if I want to go to an independent hardware store, the closest one that is open and has stuff is Tony's.
Yes.
And I end up going up from the north end because that's the closest one I can find that's open on Sundays.
Yeah, and Sharon and Matt that own that place, they are not residents of Hazel Park, but let me tell you, they are all in. And as you know, they remodeled the entire store because we're part of the Main Street program through Oakland County, which allowed us to utilize one of their historic architects that came in and helped redesign and take it back to its original. And they've invested a ton in that space. And that's one of those old style places where you walk in and you'll be like, I don't know what this is.
That's where I like to go because I'm kind of dumb.
Yeah. And they're, trust me, I'm not that great when it comes to home repair myself. But you walk in there and they're like, oh, this is what you need. It's over here. And this is how you do it. Like it's like, it's not like your typical big box stores. That's one of the things I love about Tony's. It's a staple of the community.
100%. And if you've got time, they can order it, whatever you need. There are some things that the big boxes are good for, but if you need to figure out a problem, if you need a little thing or whatever, I think it's so important to support them.
Well, and one of the nice things is because we've had a lot of new residents move into the city, and a lot of them are young professionals. It might be their first home. I remember how that was. Like, I still don't know how to do a lot of stuff, but it was even worse then. So I think a lot of younger people really appreciate that, because you go to like a Home Depot or a Lowe's, and not everybody there knows how to fix what you're trying to do and where it is even in the store. So
your district encompasses a lot of areas I mentioned. Let's talk about some of those demographic shifts in that end of the district. Because if I think about Madison Heights and my friends and people that I know there, I think about Hazel Park, I think about these things and I go, there's so much talk about Detroit being this place to be the city of Detroit. But when you see where young professionals settle out and where they go, so often you're seeing it in Hazel Park. You're seeing it in Ferndale. You're seeing it in Madison Heights. You're seeing it in areas in your district or around it. What do you think is helping drive all of that? And how is that impacting changes to those communities?
Well, I think one of the main drivers of it is, to be honest, everyone knows that Ferndale, and this isn't a dig at Ferndale, but it's gotten very expensive. And a lot of young people want to be in that area, but can't afford it. Hazel Park has really benefited from that. I would say Madison Heights and Oak Park have as well. The overflow. You want to be by those things, but you can't afford to live right by those things. If you go into Ferndale and you talk to a lot of the waiters, waitresses, bartenders, a lot of them live in my city. They live in Hazel Park because they can't afford to live in Ferndale. And again, that's not a dig on Ferndale.
Well, they're a stone's throw away from each other.
Right.
And in context of a larger geographic area, city or some other places, these suburbs are of the size that in some areas they would be the size of large neighborhoods.
Right.
In other metropolises.
Right. Especially Hazel Park. We're 2 by 2. We're not, it's
so
not
2 miles by 2 miles.
Yeah, we're not.
So you're
huge.
literally 4 times the size of the downtown Detroit, like CBD, Central Business District.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So Hazel Park's not a big city. Ferndale's not that big either. Madison Heights is probably the largest of the cities in that immediate area. Well, Royal Oak might be. Royal Oak is probably bigger.
Depending on land area, population, those things. I don't know it off the top of my head.
I don't either. But the other thing is like we sit right where 696 and 75 meet. That I hear from realtors all the time is one of the best selling points of Hazel Park.
That's the real crossroads of this region.
It certainly is. Yeah.
In so many ways. And you see part of why you're seeing the explosive growth in Royal Oak, which I think is also, again, I don't want to say trickle down, but flowing down down those mile roads into those other communities.
Exactly. Yeah. Because, I mean, Hazel Park doesn't have the same sort of housing stock that some of the others do because our housing is not as old. So you don't have a lot of the craftsman style. You don't have a lot of those things. But we do have a lot of really nice starter homes. They're small. Like my husband, our house is only 1,200 square feet, which is small compared to the house. I mean, my parents' house that I grew up in is smaller than that. There was 4 of us. Okay, well, people don't really do that anymore. You know, so 1,200 square foot home, we have 3 bedrooms. So it's a starter home for most families, you know, and a lot of our houses don't even have 3 bedrooms. Like there's a house directly across from me that has 2 bedrooms, you know. So once you start having a family, typically you might move into a larger house, but we're definitely a city of starter homes.
Now, is there a real feeling that area is turning into more of a destination, and how is that impacting things?
Yes, there's very much a feeling of that just because, I mean, I just got my haircut the other day. I go to Youngbloods, which is in Hazel Park. And a lot of times when I'm sitting there and I hear conversations, a lot of those people that are coming there to get their haircut don't live in Hazel Park, but they're coming to Hazel Park because that's where their barber is. And they have a nice men's clothing store. You know, same thing with our marijuana businesses. They're bringing people to our city that normally wouldn't have come to our city. So those things are really influencing people from outside the city to come to our community and, best of all, spend their money there.
Well, I'll tell you, and this is something that I have held as a belief for a while, if you're a business that provides something that's of value enough to somebody, once somebody gets into the car, they can go anywhere within 15, 20, 25 minutes. That's just the thing. People might have their mindset on, I'm going to go to this place here, but if they really like you, they will drive to you.
Yes.
And that's just part of the culture here as it is right now.
It is. Yeah. Because I mean, it's like Tony's, like you mentioned, you know, people go out of their way. I know people that come from like Royal Oak and Oak Park to go to Tony's just because that's the hardware store they like. There's other ones in between there.
For sure.
Because I mean, there's a nice one in Oak Park. I can't think of the name of it.
I've been there before.
Frank's or something?
Yeah, it's near producer Cheyenne's house. Yeah.
And I hear good things about them too.
It's interesting to see those shifts. I think a lot of people in general need to update their mental maps about Metro Detroit.
Yeah.
Because there's been a lot of change in the last 20 years.
Yes. Oh, there's been a ton of change. You know, I've lived in Hazel Park since 2017. My husband and I, when we moved back from California, we were looking for a space. So that's where we settled, was there. I like to move into areas that I feel, I don't want to say up and coming or whatever, but I can feel that there's a transition occurring. And
there's energy with that.
There is energy with that. And talking to some of our friends in the LGBTQ community, we noticed that, you know, people, again, that wanted to be by Ferndale, because we couldn't afford to move into Ferndale when we first came back, but we wanted to be by there because we have a lot of friends in that area. And I think it was rather surprising when we first moved there and we started talking about it, because a lot of people wouldn't admit that they lived in Hazel Park when we first got.
I remember those days.
Yeah. And the funny thing is when we had our first pride flag raising there in the city, suddenly there was all of these gay people there at City Hall that were all residents. And I think it even surprised some of us as to how many people showed up that were all residents, because there's a sizable LGBTQ community there now. I don't know if you just saw that Metro Detroit article where they were talking about describing each community in the Detroit area.
I did see that listicle.
Yes. Yeah. And it even mentioned about pride flags in our city, you know, because I mean, our city's changed dramatically. You drive through the city and there's a lot of Black Lives Matter signs and pride flags scattered throughout the city.
And even if with them, you know, if you get something like that, that's saying something, because they tend to lean towards the snark.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was a little snarky.
I mean, that's just what you expect out of them.
Hazel Park didn't get hit as hard as some of the other communities.
So your district is a rather newly created district, and it spreads a lot of space, as we talked about. Yes. It goes all the way down here. How do you handle that responsibility and challenge of, you've got a huge chunk of the suburbs and then you got a huge chunk of the city of Detroit where, maybe a lot of them may end up voting a certain way in the bigger picture, but the individual issues, I can tell you from experience, are often very different and have different challenges. How do you balance that?
I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's been a learning experience, but it's also my first time as a state legislator. So it's been a real learning experience.
It's all overall.
It's all a learning experience overall. But I will tell you that just showing up, you know, because, you know, that was one of the fears with the new districts, is that people from the suburbs would win and then never bother to represent the actual people that live in their district south of 8 Mile. So it's been a goal of mine to make sure that I always show up everywhere that I'm asked to go. Now, can I go to everywhere I'm asked to go? No, but I'd go as much as I possibly can, whether that's Highland Park, the North End, Midtown, having like I've had meetings with Sue Mosey, here in Midtown and stuff. And I mean, I've had meetings throughout the district, whether it's with block clubs. Block clubs in Detroit are a huge deal. They're a huge influence. So are churches, So when I get invited to these things, I make sure that I show up. And it isn't just showing up. It's also listening to, the needs of my constituents, whether it's in Madison Heights or, again, in the North End, and making sure that I can solve those problems. If something I can actually solve, then, results. That's all people really care about ultimately.
Well, and the constituent services, which is something that's it's very important where it's if you can't solve it, redirecting it to someone who can or giving them a map to do that.
And that's the nice thing is because of relationships that I have with maybe people in the mayor's office or wherever or in different departments, my office is able to reach out directly. And if they weren't getting an answer, because sometimes people don't know where to turn, even if it's a city issue, which a lot of times calls that we get at my office are, they just don't know which department to call. And then we direct them and then the problem gets solved. We're a small part of that, but I think people appreciate that and they recognize that.
Do you think that it's a challenge that can continue to be bridged? Because, in the city, there's a lot of pride and there's that worry that, somebody who's got a suburban district or a mostly suburban district, is that possible? And that's not a personal attack towards you, just in general. I think about with the state Senate race with Mallory McMurrow, and the person who ran against her lost handily.
Marshall Bullock.
Who's a strong public servant.
Yes.
But it does kind of change things, but also I know she's somebody who's been out there doing a lot of work as well. She's an Energizer bunny as far as getting out there and doing everything. Is this something that, you feel like this works?
I do. And the reason I feel it works is because for decades, literally decades, if not longer, we have talked about working together, suburbs and city. Now we have no choice but to work together. And to me, that's a good thing, because not only am I looking out for people in the suburbs, I'm also looking out for my constituents in the city. And I don't always think that people in the suburbs realize what the issues in the city are. Now that is kind of crossing over 8 Mile. It's not as much of an invisible border that we have, or wall, I should say, because now we are working together. We don't have a choice but to work together. And I think that's a great thing.
Well, and if you look at demographic maps, let's be honest, there's been a lot of changes in those communities.
There has been a lot of changes in those communities. Like if you look at Donovan McKinney's district, which is right next door, he represents parts of Detroit, but also a big chunk of Warren and Centerline. All the inner ring areas have just changed dramatically. And I think that we need to recognize that. And I think that these new districts kind of do recognize that. Now, are they perfect? No. But
you do have one precinct different, or is it a half precinct?
It's technically a half a precinct that they had to turn into a full precinct. Yeah, that's an oddity. Actually, it's not as much of an oddity because I've talked to other representatives who have had the same, but it's kind of a weird situation with that.
Right. No district's perfect, but you feel all in all, this can work.
I do feel it can work. With any district, if the elected official's not showing up, not doing their job, well, then no, it's not going to work. I mean, it is what it is with the representation that you elect. So you have to make sure that the person says and does what they're going to do.
Yeah, it's clocked into work.
Yeah. I assume that all of my counterparts are all showing up, but I make sure that I show up for my constituents.
Before we started, you mentioned that you're working on starting a transit caucus. Let's talk about that because that's something that I haven't seen before.
Yeah, I believe it's the first one. I'm not positive of that.
I don't remember it.
I don't
Some things are foggy, but I think I'd remember that one.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure if it's the first time or not, but Representative Jason Morgan and I, he's out of the Ann Arbor area, which transit's very big for them. We are starting a transit caucus because we're really trying to elevate the conversation at the state level. We're trying to not just include people, though, from Southeast Michigan. Like we want people from across the state, representatives from across the state to be part of this. Because it's not just a Southeast Michigan issue. This is where we focus on it a lot of times just because it's
where you represent.
Right. But we want to make sure that we have voices from across the state. We really want to make sure that that conversation is elevated to the state level where it has not been before. There might be one or two representatives, that they were all about transit. But once we have people that are involved in it, that are on different committees, for example, like Jason Hoskins out of Southfield, he wants to be on it because for him, it's an economic development issue. So once we have a bunch of people that will be elevating this conversation around transit, making sure that it's always at the forefront when funding comes around is very important. I have a lot of constituents that rely on public transit and improving public transit. If we have time, I'd like to tell you a little story about when I was on council. Yeah. One of the true representatives, the Transit Riders United, him and I went and took a bus from Hazel Park, right in front of Kroger there at 9 Mile and John R., headed south, went to State Fair, took State Fair across. He wanted to basically give me an experience of what it was like to ride the buses around in the Detroit area, because I had never been on public transit in Detroit.
Which is a very common thing. Now,
yes.
I've actually relied on it to go to work before. Yeah. But most people, in my experience, maybe 95% just never have ridden it before.
Yeah. When my husband and I lived in California briefly, public transit was everywhere. It was just commonplace. Like, you always took it. And we loved being able to take it because we lived in the Bay Area.
Will tell you it's terrible.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's So there's a
they
podcaster.
Don't know how good they got it.
Right. There's a podcaster in Chicago I had a little email conversation with. And I was like, I heard an episode of theirs where they were complaining a lot about the CTA. And I'm like, just be glad you're not here. Here you go. Right. When you're mad that your train's 5 minutes late or 5 minutes less frequent, try waiting another hour.
Right. And that's where I was going with that story, because, we went from State Fair to Woodward, and as soon as the bus stopped and the doors opened, like 3 people ran all across all the lanes of Woodward to catch the bus on the other side because of timing issues. To be able to go to work, school, doctor's appointments, whatever it is. I mean, you don't want to have to spend 3 hours because of a bus timing, because now if you had to wait for the next bus, who knows when that's going to show up, because there's also the problem with ghost buses where, they're on the schedule. Looks like it's coming and it's not even show.
You've got a lack of drivers for a variety of reasons.
Right.
You've got 2 systems to deal with those lack of reasons. You've got Smart, you got DDOT. You've got other systems like Ann Arbor, frankly, that are paying close to $30 an hour for their drivers.
Right.
So if you're a driver, you can make close to double. Of course, you're going to do it.
Right.
We have to think about those very practical things. And I think that's part of why there was a recent report that I saw today that transit is 49% of the usage that it was before the pandemic here in Metro Detroit. And I feel like that's part of the reason is if you can't rely on it, if you could lose your job, you're not going to take a chance on it.
Right. I think we need to look at transit as more than just like, oh, people in the suburbs can park their car, hop on it, and go down to a Tigers game. Well, that's great. There are people that rely on it on a daily basis as well to get around town for as simple as things as going grocery shopping or to the doctor, So I think we need to have a much broader conversation. I think we're at a place now because I feel like there's a lot more younger people, whether they're in the city or in the inner ring suburbs, that are demanding it. And I think we need to be listening.
What would you say to a constituent of yours that maybe isn't as sold? They're like, hey, I really like Madison Heights, or you name it, right? Mm-hmm. I don't feel like I would ever use this.
Well, you might not use it, and that's fine if you don't use it. But we have a lot of small businesses in those communities that are struggling to find employees, and it's an economic driver. So whether or not you ever use it, it still will benefit you and it will benefit your community because it is an economic driver. If people can get jobs in Madison Heights because they know there's reliable transportation to get them there, well, then they're going to apply for jobs in Madison Heights, So while you may not ever use it because you love your car, which being in Michigan, a lot of people love their cars. Other people, they're not in that same situation, And again, it's an economic driver. That's how I would probably try to sell it to somebody else. I don't know how else we're going to move our region forward economically as a community as a whole, unless we have really good public transit. I think we're going to sit stagnant until we really, really get some really good public transit.
Well, and increasing population is what they're talking about a lot in Lansing.
Yes, they are. That's one of the things that people want. When young people move away, they go to communities oftentimes where there's public transit. Well, if they move to Chicago, well, then they don't have to have a car, which is one less expense. I mean, having a car here in Michigan, we know is not cheap.
Now, do you have an idea or a vision of what that could look like?
That I don't. We have just started talking. There's a lot of people that are looking at rail. There's a lot of people looking at the busing. So we're going to have to come together as to see what that actually looks like. I don't know if a rail system in Detroit is feasible or not. I would love for it to be quite honest with you. I'd love to see the Q line go all the way to Pontiac. I think that would be great, or something similar. Will that ever happen? That I don't know. I mean, you're probably talking billions of dollars, I would imagine. So,
would you be open to something like a public-private partnership, or is this something you think the state should lead on? Or because the hardest part about this, right? You look at the numbers. You look at the numbers and you say, well, why isn't it there? It's real simple. Compared to like areas, we literally just don't spend the money on it.
Yeah. I think a public-private partnership is probably the most feasible. That way it isn't just tax dollars that are paying for it. We need to make sure that it's kept up, it's running. Businesses, in my opinion, sometimes tend to make them run on time, the trains run on time. In my opinion, that is the direction I feel like we should go as a public-private cooperation, whatever that looks like.
And maybe that's part of the reason why when Dan Gilbert piped up and talked about transit, I saw everybody's head in the virtual room just whip around and be like, Uncle Dan's talking about it. And I say that affectionately.
Right.
But whenever he speaks, it seems like everybody, both sides of 8 Mile, Lansing, everyone else, they listen in a way that, frankly, I haven't seen from a business leader in a very long time.
Yeah, I really appreciate that he mentions those things because people listen to him. And these are conversations that we have to continue to have. We are still in the mindset of all these vehicles, cars, and making sure we have parking and all of this stuff. But that is not the direction that the world is going.
Well, and if you think about the domestic 3 or whatever you want to call it, if you look at what's happening with Michigan Central and all of that, they, in a way, know that.
Yes.
Right? I feel like there's a huge cultural disconnect between the folks who are like, let's burn all the gas. Let's do all the things. Let's do the cars, right? And then the companies themselves that, of course, they want to sell cars. Of course, they want to do those things. But they're also global companies working in global markets who are like, hey, there's opportunities in mobility and all those things. You go to Michigan Central. I went to the first charging road or whatever. That charging road, one of the points they made is that transit could use the charging road.
Right. And I think that now we're at a point where public transit and the big 3 or any of the car companies, like they all see the direction the world is heading. I mean, that's their job. That's how they stay in business, is knowing what's coming next.
I've had futurists from these companies before. Yeah. They do think about the future, despite whatever the online commentary would say.
Right. They see what's coming and they can either be part of it or, as we know, companies die. I mean, look at Kodak, like with digital cameras.
Nobody ever thought Kodak would go away.
No, nobody ever thought that. But for some reason, they didn't see it on the horizon. Or they didn't, they ignored it. I'm not sure. I don't know. I was never part of the meetings. But now you hardly hear anything about Kodak. And they used to be a major, major company.
It's like a vintage revival brand at this point.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. We're recording this on the eve of the end of 2023, looking to 2024. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, what are some of the things for 2024 that you're looking forward to where you sit and everything that's going on?
Well, I think we have a real opportunity because, we still control, while we do control the House, the Senate, and the governor, we are down 2 people. So I'm assuming we're going to, I don't know this for sure because this all comes from the Speaker's office, Speaker Tate's office, but we're going to start off with committees because we still have a lot of legislation that we're working on. Like we like to say, it's all people-centered legislation. And a lot of that stuff still needs to make its way through the committee. Special election's not going to happen until April. So we're going to have a few months of that. But I have some things that I'm working on, and I know a lot of my colleagues do as well. And again, we're going to keep doing the things that we promised we would do, and I think we've done quite a bit of that in 2023. And in 2024, I think you're going to see a lot more of that. I'm working on this legislation that's called Work and Save. Work and Save is a program that's already been passed in 19 other states for small businesses, independent workers, where they can't afford to offer a retirement savings program. What this will do is create a program at the state level very similar to the 529 college savings programs, where employers sign up their employees, and they can always opt out if they want, to get people to start saving for retirement at a much earlier age. Because what we're expecting, according to Pew and AARP, is to be able to save like $30 million, if we can keep senior citizens off from public assistance. So there's a lot of these things. And also what this will do is help in some communities build generational wealth because it's money that will be able to be inherited. That's one of the big things that I'm working on. There's several other things I'm working on as well. So in 2024, like I said, we're doing a lot. It's going to be a big focus on people-centered legislation.
To those who may have been frustrated with the progress of the first 2023, you're saying there's more to come.
Oh, there's a lot more to come. I know people were frustrated. We got a ton done. Like it was exhausting.
So you feel like do you feel like the session didn't get the credit it deserved?
I don't think that it's not that we didn't get the credit that we deserve. I don't think we were good about getting the message out that what we were doing and what we were working on. It took 50 years and we got the LGBTQ included in the Elliott Larson legislation. We got that passed. We repealed the pension tax. We got rid of right to work. I mean, we took on some big, big things and we got those done. We had a bill on the governor's desk for the first time since the 1940s and by February. That just doesn't typically happen. So we hit the ground running. But it's like I hear from some of my Senate colleagues, we had 40 years of pent up legislation just raring to go. We got as much of it done as we could. Are we done? No.
All right. Representative McFall, I hope you come back.
Oh, happy to. Anytime.
Well, I hope you got something out of that conversation. Feedback, as always, 313-789-3211 or dailydetroit@gmail.com. As always, thank you to our members on Patreon, patreon.com/dailydetroit. Advertising alone does not get it done. Your membership matters, and we have a new round of Rocks classes going out the door. With that, I am Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll talk tomorrow.